At 0614 hours, the sonar operator aboard the USS Gravely, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer escorting 3 merchant vessels through the Gulf of Oman, reported a contact that made no sense. A wooden-hulled fishing dhow, the kind that has sailed these waters for centuries, was emitting an electromagnetic signature that belonged on a warship. Buried under the smell of fish and diesel and sun-bleached timber was a signal so faint that only the Gravely's latest software update, installed 9 days ago specifically because of the war, was sensitive enough to detect it. The signal was a targeting beacon, and it was painting the Gravely's exact position for someone on the Iranian coast 130 kilometers away. The fishing boat wasn't fishing, it was aiming, and the technology hidden inside its hull wasn't Iranian. 16 nautical miles off Fujairah, the Gulf of Oman should have been the safe corridor. After the Strait of Hormuz was effectively closed by Iranian drones and fast boats, CENTCOM had rerouted commercial shipping through deeper, wider waters where American escorts could operate with room to maneuver. For 11 days, the system had worked. Destroyers shadowed tankers, Poseidon patrol aircraft swept ahead, the IRGC probed with surveillance drones, but never committed a serious attack in the open Gulf. The assumption was that Iran couldn't hit targets accurately at those distances without the kind of sensor network it simply didn't possess. The assumption was correct. Iran couldn't, but Russia could. Somewhere in the weeks before the attack, Russian intelligence had identified the weakest link in CENTCOM's escort operation. Not the destroyers, not the aircraft, the gap between them. American warships escorted tankers through a corridor roughly 40 nautical miles long. For most of that transit, the escorts were within weapons range. But during the handoff period, when one destroyer passed responsibility to the next, there was a window of approximately 22 minutes where the tanker convoy was covered by a single ship instead of overlapping fields of fire. The timing was predictable because the Navy published transit schedules to commercial shipping operators so tankers would know when to enter the corridor. Russia didn't need a spy inside CENTCOM, they just needed to read the same bulletin board every shipping company in the Gulf could access. But knowing when to strike was only half the problem. The other half was knowing exactly where the escort ship would be at the moment of launch. An anti-ship ballistic missile needs a precise fix on its target, not a general area, not a last known position, but a live coordinate updated within minutes of firing. Iran's shore-based radars couldn't reach that far into the Gulf of Oman. Its satellites didn't have the resolution. Its drones would be detected and shot down long before they got close enough. So Russia gave Iran something that looked like a fishing boat. The dhow had been modified in a port facility on Badr Abbas 3 weeks earlier. Below the deck planks and the nets and the Caspians, a Russian-built passive emitter locator had been bolted to the keel. The device did something deceptively simple. It listened for the Gravely's navigation radar, the same low-power radar every warship uses to avoid collisions, calculated the bearing and distance to the source, and transmitted a compressed targeting update to the Iranian coast on a frequency disguised as a standard maritime weather broadcast. To every electronic sensor in the Gulf, it looked like a fishing boat checking the forecast. To the IRGC missile battery at Jask, it was a laser pointer on a $30 billion target. A Russian technical advisor had installed the system. A Russian signals officer had calibrated it. And right now, an Iranian fisherman who had been paid 3 months' salary to keep his boat within 15 nautical miles of the American convoy was doing exactly that, not understanding that the metal box bolted under his deck was about to start a chain of events that would end with missiles in the air. But the fisherman didn't know about the Gravely's latest software update, and neither did Moscow. 9 days earlier, as the war expanded into the Gulf of Oman, the Navy had pushed an emergency update to every Arleigh Burke destroyer in theater. The update added a new detection layer specifically designed to catch passive targeting systems hiding inside civilian vessels, exactly the kind of technique Russia had used in Ukraine to guide missile strikes on naval targets in the Black Sea. The update worked by cross-referencing the electromagnetic signature of nearby vessels against their registered profiles. A wooden dhow should emit nothing more than a basic marine radio and maybe a fish finder. When the Gravely system flagged the dhow at 0614, it was because the boat's emissions didn't match its profile by a factor of 12. Sonar technician Second Class Rivera saw the alert and hesitated for exactly one reason. If he was wrong, he was accusing a fisherman of being a Russian targeting platform. If he was right and he didn't report it, the next thing the Gravely would see was an inbound missile. He reported it. Commander Diane Okoro, the Gravely's captain, was in the Combat Information Center within 90 seconds. She looked at the emission profile, looked at the dhow's position, looked at the geometry between the dhow and the known IRGC missile battery at Jask, and understood immediately what she was seeing. The dhow was positioned at the precise bearing that would give a shore-based missile battery an optimal intercept angle on the Gravely's current course. That wasn't coincidence. That was targeting. She now had a choice that would define the next 4 minutes of her life and possibly the rest of her career. Option 1, destroy the dhow.
A single round from the NK-45 5-inch gun would erase it from the surface, but there were likely civilians aboard, fishermen who might have no idea what was hidden under their deck. Killing civilians on a fishing boat in the Gulf of Oman, even one being used as a targeting platform, would be an international incident before the smoke cleared. Tehran would parade the dead fishermen on state media within the hour. Option 2. Jam the Dow's transmissions and maneuver away from the targeting solution. That would break the kill chain without firing a shot, but it would also tell Russia that their technique had been detected, and next time they'd use something harder to find. Okoron chose a third option that nobody in Moscow or Tehran had considered. She ordered the Gravely to maintain course and speed. She told the electronic warfare officer to let the Dow keep transmitting, and she called the Hawkeye overhead to vector a P-8A Poseidon to begin recording every emission the Dow was making, every frequency, every encoding pattern, every transmission interval. She was going to let the targeting beacon paint her own ship while she captured the complete technical fingerprint of a Russian intelligence system in the act. She was using her own destroyer as bait. For the next 6 minutes, the Gravely sailed a straight line with a Russian targeting device locked onto her hull, feeding coordinates to an Iranian missile battery that could fire at any moment. Every sailor in the Combat Information Center knew what was happening. The Aegis combat system was tracking the known battery location at Jazg. 2 standard missile interceptors were already assigned to the engagement. The Phalanx Kosian weapons system was on automatic. If a missile launched, they had roughly 70 seconds to detect it, track it, and kill it before impact.
At 0622, 8 minutes after the Dow was first detected, the Poseidon confirmed it had captured a complete electronic profile of the targeting system. Enough data to identify every similar device Russia might deploy across the Gulf. Okoro ordered the electronic warfare officer to jam the Dow's frequency. The targeting link went dead in less than a second, but at Jazg, the last coordinate package had already been received. The missile battery had a fix that was 4 minutes old. For a target moving at 18 knots, that meant the Gravely would be roughly 2.4 kilometers from the position the missile was aimed at, close enough for the missile's terminal seeker to acquire on its own. At 0623, the Hawkeye detected a ballistic launch from the Jazg coastal battery. 1 missile, trajectory consistent with a Khalig-E-Far's anti-ship ballistic missile, Iran's carrier killer, a weapon designed to dive onto its target from the edge of space at Mach 3. The Gravely's Aegis system had been tracking the battery. The moment the missile cleared the launcher, the SPY-1D radar locked it automatically. The combat system calculated an intercept solution in 1.7 seconds. 2 SM-6 Standard missiles left the forward vertical launch cells 3 seconds apart. The first interceptor met the Iranian ballistic missile at 62,000 feet, roughly 11 miles above the Gulf of Oman. The warhead detonated close enough to shred the missile's guidance fins and send it tumbling. The second SM-6 hit the debris field 1.4 seconds later and destroyed what was left. From launch to kill, 31 seconds. Okoro didn't celebrate. She gave 2 orders. The first was to the Poseidon. Lock the Jazg battery coordinates and transmit to the submarine operating in Sector 7. The second was to the convoy. All vessels increase speed and alter course south. 14 minutes later, 2 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from a Virginia-class submarine in the Gulf of Oman struck the Jazg coastal battery. The first hit the launcher rail. The second hit the command bunker. Satellite imagery captured 40 minutes later showed both structures destroyed. The battery that had just fired at an American warship using Russian targeting data no longer existed, and neither did the fishing Dow's secret. Within hours, the electronic profile captured by the Poseidon was distributed to every NATO-allied navy operating in the region. Within 2 days, 3 more Dows carrying identical Russian-built passive emitter locators were identified and seized by coalition forces in the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. Each one had been modified in the same Bandar Abbas port facility. Each one carried the same calibration signatures traced back to Russian naval intelligence. The fishermen aboard 2 of them had no idea what was bolted to their keels. The third boat was empty. Its crew had apparently been warned. The Kremlin denied everything. Iran called the Tomahawk strikes on Jazg a war crime. Oil futures climbed another 4%. But in fleet headquarters at Bahrain, Commander Okoro's engagement was already being studied as a textbook case. She had detected a concealed Russian targeting system, captured its complete electronic signature, baited the enemy into firing so the launch site could be confirmed, intercepted a ballistic missile at the edge of space, and destroyed the battery that fired it, all within 9 minutes. From detection to revenge, the entire kill chain lasted less time than it takes to brew a pot of coffee. Russia had hidden a targeting device inside a fishing boat and thought no one would notice. The Navy noticed in 8 minutes, captured the proof, and erased the source. The question Moscow now had to answer wasn't whether the technique worked, it was how many more of their systems the Americans had already found and were quietly watching, waiting for the right moment to let them know. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel and watch this other video on screen right now. See you in the next one.